It's so dumb though.
No, I know. Yeah, I mean, is it like a quote X? Like, is it a re X? What do we call a threat?
Oh,
Threx?
you're replacing tweets there. Yeah, quote a QX. Do
A
you QX something?
QX? Do you?
It doesn't flow. Tweets
No.
flew they flew like birds, but like it
Sure.
was it was natural. Like, you know, birds tweet, and like tweeting is like a little thing that you say. Like it just the visual was there, the whole picture, the brand, the verb,
Yeah. It
everything.
had
And
synergy.
then
It had synergy.
it did.
And corpos love synergy.
We all do. And he just threw it away because he bought X.com for $1 million back in the 90s when $1 million would be worth like $1 trillion now. And he's obsessed with X as a brand, as an idea. I don't understand it, but I don't think it's going to last. I think it's going to be like Sandstone or the Sprint Center or something like that. Like, we're all just going to continue to call it Twitter forever, right?
Sure, or Kauffman Stadium, like whatever it is
Royal
now that it's
Stadium.
been branded, or Geehaw Field at Arrowhead
Geehaw.
Stadium.
Geehaw's a great example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it will forever be Twitter, and it will officially be Twitter after this guy eventually runs out of money and has to sell it for nothing back to somebody who actually knows and understands branding, which at this point I'm convinced is literally any person in the world other than Elon Musk. Because again, like, I just don't understand how he's tried to change every company he's ever bought and purchased and run to X. He
Uh-huh.
wanted to make PayPal
X
X.
PayPal.
He wanted to make
Yeah.
SpaceX. It's literally space with an X. He
Uh-huh.
wanted to make Tesla X. He wanted to make all these companies X. And he finally got away with it with this vanity project that is Twitter. And he's fucking it up for everybody. And I'm steamed about it. You're steamed about it. But you know who's really steamed about it? Is Jeff
Yep.
Bezos. Because that guy created literally the greatest merchandise empire in the history of the world. And somehow Elon Musk still has more money than he does. Welcome into It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. You can find me on X at Word Lawyer. I can't do it. I will be calling it X as a bit exclusively. If you hear me refer to it as X, you should laugh. It's intended to be a joke. It clearly is and forever will be to us Twitter. Here with me is always my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Wit on the X app.
Man, it just doesn't work. It sounds like we're hawking porn. Like,
it's absurd how much it doesn't work. Like, it just does not work on any level at all. It's positively absurd. You know what does work is Underdog Fantasy.
Boom.
Use our promo code Sunny SUNNY to get a match deposit up to your first $100. It's draft season, so pop in there, do your best ball drafts, fry those off. Speaking of fantasy, our leagues are finalized. Congratulations to those who made it. For those who did not, keep your chin up. There will be opportunities. I'm sure there will
keeping
be
a running list of people that reached out, that
Taylor
expressed
loves
interest.
to keep lists. You are on his watch list.
Yes.
You'll be on it till the end of time.
Yes.
Leagues are finalized. We're going to be working on getting those drafts going. So we sent out some information on Cutthroat today. Had a blast talking shop over Cutthroat. It's going to be a super fun league. You guys are probably going to hear about it on the podcast because, we like to talk fantasy, not in an annoying way. That's not what this podcast is about, but obviously it's part of football. We're fired up about it. It's going to be exciting.
Yes. Fantasy's great. And if you don't like fantasy, just zone out and, keep mowing the lawn or whatever. And
just fire off a couple X's while we're talking about fantasy.
A couple X's. I can't do it.
We got a great show for you guys today. We've got news. There is a lot of news, just an absurd amount of news. We recorded last week on the eve of training camp, and since then, training camp has started. A bunch of players have gotten hurt, a bunch of players have gotten paid, a bunch of players have not gotten paid. We're going to include camp news and news, but it'll get its own little special segment because the first padded practice of the season was today. We've got what is happening as the other NFL teams kick off their training camp. The non-Chiefs teams will talk about what those teams are doing. And we've got our ongoing segment, the Ass Blast from the past, the 10-1 Kansas City Chiefs, 2003 Kansas City Chiefs, I should say. I didn't put that in here. It's important for me to contextualize which 10-1 Chiefs team was traveling to San Diego to take on the 2-9 Chargers. It's the 2003 Chiefs. They're 10-1. We rebounded from the loss. We beat the Raiders last week. We're going to San Diego. We'll talk about that game to close the show out. But first, so when we were sitting here recording last Thursday, we were obviously excited about camp starting, but last Friday, after we recorded the show, was when veterans were supposed to show up to camp and report. Not the first day that they were going to practice, but they're just supposed to be there and show their faces and, weigh in or whatever they're supposed to do. We were expressing hope and optimism that Chris Jones would show up last Friday and he'd have a new deal, or he wouldn't, but he'd be at camp and everything would be hunky-dory. Unfortunately, here we are a week later. We are still waiting for that to happen. Chris Jones has not reported to camp. He does not have a new contract. And we've sort of been operating under the assumption all offseason, based on the fact that he said, I'm going to be a Chief for life, based on the fact that Brett Veach said, the two sides are having great communication. We expect something to get done closer to training camp. And importantly, based on the fact that we heard no news to suggest this was not going to get done until last Friday. Chris Jones doesn't show up to camp. Adam Schefter reports that he and the Chiefs are far apart on a new contract. And then the Athletics' Nate Taylor reported the following day that Jones is targeting $30 million APY, which is Aaron Donald money. That's not Quinnen Williams money. Quinnen Williams, of course, recently signed a contract extension for $24 million APY. He is the second highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL. Aaron Donald's at $30 million APY. That's got to be like the biggest gap between number one and number two at any position, right? I mean, I haven't looked it up, but it has to be.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you don't get a lot of production gap there. I mean, Aaron Donald, despite,
not at all.
We love Chris Jones. I think everyone slotted him as the second best defensive tackle for his, recent career here. But Aaron Donald's a Hall of Famer. And even though Chris Jones is on his way there, that gap made sense between Aaron Donald and the rest of the NFL.
I mean,
it is insane. It's way too much money. It's too much money for Aaron Donald.
I mean, you almost never see. It's commonplace for stars to get paid like stars, but it's a salary cap league, and it's very rare for you to see one guy at one position in the NFL making 25% more money than the next highest paid guy. It just doesn't really happen. And even though Aaron Donald had a great run and arguably is still on that run where he's the best defensive tackle in the NFL, I think Chris Jones was better last year when both were healthy. But I mean, for the two sides to be far apart, which is what Schefter is saying, it makes sense, and it checks out that Nate Taylor would say he's targeting Aaron Donald money, $30 million APY, because, I mean, that would explain them being far apart. The Chiefs want to pay him like Quinnen Williams. Chris Jones wants to be played like Aaron Donald.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that is just fuck the Rams for setting this bar so ridiculous high. And I know they don't care about anything team construction-wise, but, the rest of us out here are trying to put a roster together. That's right. Just, it's absurd. I was thinking
the rest of us out here are trying to win multiple championships.
Exactly.
Not
just go one and then explode the whole thing. And, I was thinking if one position in the NFL was worthy of a big gap between number one and number two, to me, it would be kicker, because Justin Tucker is the absolute GOAT all time, and no one else is really even any good at all. And so I looked, and Justin Tucker's average value per year is $6 million. Can you guess even, and you can't, but who the number two paid kicker in the NFL is?
Butker's got to be.
He's fine. He's 10th.
Close. He's 10th. Okay.
Yeah, he has $4.05 million. Number two is Colts kicker Matt Gay at $5.625 million, right below.
Right there.
Justin Tucker's 6, right there. So,
the same dude.
You're absolutely right that the gap between 1 and 2 at any position, no matter what the talent gap is at that position, is just not big, because when you're going to sign a deal, if you're already going to be paid the most anyone's getting paid, the team's not going to throw you just an extra $5-10 million a year just for fun. So I've always hated the Aaron Donald deal, and I knew that Chris Jones valued himself very highly, as he should. He's a game wrecker. He is an absolute animal. Easily, when Donald was hurt last year, easily the best D tackle in the league. I mean, he was number one in total snaps, number one in pass rush win rate, number one across the board. He was a monster. But the $30 million is just such a hard number to stomach for the Chiefs. I mean,
Yeah,
that
I
is
mean,
a
yeah,
boatload of cash.
it's a hard. It just is. And listen, you and I, we will never complain about a player wanting to get paid what he
No.
perceives his worth to be. And I certainly wouldn't be asking Chris Jones to take a pay cut, but I also think that like it does demonstrate a little bit. I don't want to say a lack of awareness. That's not quite the right phrase, but like the Chiefs can't afford to pay a defensive tackle $30 million. They just can't. It just doesn't make sense when you already have Patrick Mahomes making what he's making. You know, Travis Kelce obviously is grossly underpaid, as Mike Florio consistently reminds us, as is Patrick Mahomes for that matter. But listen, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense for them to pay a wide receiver and even the best, you know, one of the three best wide receivers in the NFL, Tyreek Hill. Didn't make sense for them to pay Tyreek Hill $30 million a year.
No.
It doesn't make sense for them to pay Aaron or Chris Jones $30 million a year. It doesn't. I mean, like, he's an amazing player, but like, I just think it demonstrates it's not a lack of awareness. It's not selfishness. It's just a guy wanting to get paid. But like, he has to understand that the Chiefs aren't giving him $30 million a year because they don't want to. It's because it does not make good sense for the Chiefs from a roster building standpoint to do that.
No. And I mean, you've got, you know, Tooney with 20 million, 22 million, and you've got Justin Reed and all those guys. I mean, it's just not, if you're going to
offensive linemen and
if you're going to compete for a Super Bowl, multiple Super Bowls, if you're going to be on this dynasty where Chris Jones is smack dab in the middle of one of the players that also, you know, won the Super 54 as well as 57. Sure. I mean, he's
a Ring of Famer. He's on track to threaten for a Hall of Fame spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And
he has a lot to lose by transferring to a bad team and fading into irrelevance.
Just like Tyreek did.
Yes. And I mean, I would say even more for Chris because he's now gotten his second ring. Like, sure. You know, like the Chiefs clearly are positioned to get more of those. We all know
they are. Sure,
and
of course.
It just feels like he's throwing away this opportunity, this once in a lifetime opportunity. Now, I say throwing away. Maybe he just thinks the Chiefs will cave and they'll move some money around and they'll get it done and they'll sign him for 30 million and life will be good. But like, if he thinks that the Chiefs can do that, it feels like he's getting bad info.
Yeah, I don't really get it. And I also don't really get the holdout because this was the next thing on the Chris Jones agenda. You know, like Nick Bosa has told the 49ers that he's not going to play without a new contract. But Nick Bosa's at camp. He's doing the hold in.
Yeah.
When you show up to camp, you report, but then you're like, hitting's not really my thing, coach. You know, like I'm not going to run. You know, like I choose not to run. That's what he's doing. He's on the field, but he's not doing any work, right? Like that way he can't get fined. He's literally there so he can't get fined. So he won't get fined.
References out the ass.
Dropping references all over the place. All right, I'm done with that. But listen, under the new CBA, he is subject to a mandatory $50,000 fine every day he doesn't show up to camp. And in the new CBA, the owners twisted the knife a little bit and said, actually, you know, because what used to happen is, you know, guys would hold out and they'd eventually come to terms on a new deal, and the teams would just say, you're good. We'll waive the fine money. We were able to come to an agreement. You're back now. It's all good. In the new CBA, the owners were like, no, we want to find these guys. We're taking this money out of their paycheck. So now the teams can't waive it. They can't waive those fines if Chris shows up. So, I mean, if he skips the entirety of training camp, he's costing himself like a few $1 million, and that's going to come out of his bottom line if and when he signs a new contract or when he reports, because he's still under contract for this season too. I mean, you know, he's not under the tag. He's under contract. It just is the
mess.
It's a frustrating situation because it doesn't seem like anybody is winning here. Like Chris is losing $50,000 a day. And while he posted on Instagram that he's working, and he of course posted a picture of him working out and he looks
monstrous.
Yeah. Yeah. He's stacked like a brick shit house, like he always has been. But listen, like it's obviously not ideal for him to be losing $50,000 a day. He can afford it, you know, but it's not ideal. Well, and at the same time, like it certainly is not helping the team. I mean, I don't even want to speak the possibility, but like guys showing up late to camp is well documented. They are at greater risk for injury if they're not out there, no matter what they're doing on the side.
Yep.
Like being in camp, being in pads, working against your teammates, other NFL players on an NFL field at the practice facility. That's the best situation to be in for conditioning purposes. And you have to be in good shape week one, because if you don't, there's going to be a greater chance that you get hurt. And that doesn't help anybody. It certainly doesn't help Chris, and it certainly doesn't help the Chiefs.
Well, and training camp has always seemed to me like, they want to ramp you up. They don't want to just throw you out there. And they start off and they don't even wear pads at first, and they just kind of get their conditioning in, and they're easing the guys back into their bodies, back into getting into weekly car wrecks. Like that's what they're doing. Right. And to just kind of, hold out for some of that early on conditioning. Like I get you're a veteran, but like you said, it's proven more often than not to be not helpful to that player's physical performance that year if they hold out. And, if he's nickel and diming with the Chiefs about his contract number, but yet also at the same time willing to eat $50,000 a day, like that, if I'm going to the negotiating table and I'm just like, all right, man, every day that you don't sign this deal, like the number is going down. The actual number that you will get in money is going down $50,000 a day. And like, we're not going to then pay you more if you hold out 7 days. We're not going to throw an extra $350,000 on the contract. Like that's not how it works. So it's frustrating. And I know it's a business. I know that Chris Jones is, signing his last big deal at 28. You're not going to get big deals after this age. And that's important. And I'm sure that's played a factor in his circle, talking to him about the leverage and all that stuff that like, look, you're not going to get another payout, but man, just figure it out. Both sides, please. That's all we're asking. Just figure it out. Don't let this linger. We have championships to win.
I should have structured this podcast a little bit differently, because we're going to hit another piece of negative news in a row. And
sandwich.
It bums me out. I'm usually better about this, and I apologize to our listeners, because I do not like, especially today, first week of padded practices.
Let's tweak
the
it.
Seasons. Yeah, let's sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Let's
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
We
all
can
right.
do that.
Great. Yeah. Good. Okay.
We're gonna run Burgundy a little bit, but we can do that.
I'm just gonna cut this, and I'm gonna move it up.
Control X and Control V, and we'll
just pop this up here.
There you go.
All right. So let's talk about this. So Clark Hunt was asked the annual question about how long Andy Reid will keep coaching. He says that retirement has never come up in their conversations, which is honestly pretty wild, because they talk every week.
It's a little negligent to me. Yeah, like you're not even going to check in with him?
Sure, you're not going to ask him. Andy himself addressed it in a recent interview. He said, how Kenny Chesney has that song about his blue chair? I joke about that, but when I can't get out of my blue chair down here at the beach house, I'm going to retire. So I got out of it this year, and we'll just see how it goes every year after this, right? But I feel good, and he, meaning Mahomes, does make it fun. He does make it fun. There are other things that go into being a head coach that you have to look at too. But listen, I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I think that's probably the most important thing. I like teaching, and I like the group of kids I've got, Pat obviously being one of the big ones, and it's a great organization. I've been very fortunate to work for 3 great organizations. I've been very lucky that way. I mean, that's positive news. There you go. We did it. We made a sandwich.
That is really good to hear. I do think that, a lot of our just kind of estimation of Andy's mindset, I mean, all of ours comes from the outside, but even like the kind of insider stuff that we hear, whatever, like no one's really talked about him being close other than rumors that come out, kind of once a year, and then they get shot down, and then that's that. And that's kind of what happened this year around the Super Bowl. And I mean, the fact that he's a little bit older and a little bit bigger, I mean, everyone does kind of just say like, all right, how much does he got left in the tank? But then you look at him getting to the facility at the crack of dawn every day and being the last one out, and you look at his play designs, and you just look at his investment in the team mentally, and like that does not seem like a dude that is looking forward to retirement. It just he's a grinder, and always has been. It's one of the reasons that he's the GOAT, and love the dude to death.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about another head coach, rival division head coach here in a minute, and it's always such a fun contrast between, Andy Reid getting off of the chair at his beach house, probably after like spending 2 days on the beach, the week after winning the Super Bowl and getting back to grind. And then, another coach that's in Cancun the week before the draft and ripping bong hits with, 18-year-olds in some dorm somewhere. Okay, let's do the negative piece of news here. Kadarius Toney.
Woof.
I mean, it's a frustrating situation. So first day of practice, he's out taking punt return reps, which, I wish I could. I've gone back and forth on this because I wish I could say, like, well, why would you have, like, if you really think this guy's going to be your number one receiver, why do you have him even taking punt return reps? But I mean, the Super Bowl happened. I watched the Super Bowl. So, like, I get it.
But doesn't it also feel like it would have just happened?
Sure.
Like,
well, yeah, no, definitely, for sure. I mean, it feels like this was inevitable. It was a ticking time bomb. If it hadn't happened in the first day of camp on punt return reps, he tweaked his knee. Schefter initially reported that he had aggravated the knee, that he had surgically cleaned up in the offseason and should be ready for week 1. This turned out to be fake news. But on Tuesday, we learned that he did have surgery. It just was on the knee that he just this week tweaked. So he had a little cleanup procedure. We don't have a lot of details on this. I checked just a couple of hours ago to see if there were any updates. We learned from Andy on Tuesday that he had the surgery and that, it's not something that's season ending. Usually with like a meniscus, like a meniscus injury that isn't a full tear, they can go in and trim that and clean that up. And a lot of times, guys can come back from that in 4 to 6 weeks, guys that aren't Kadarius Toney. But we just don't have a lot of details on this. Andy said there's still a chance he'll be back by week 1. On Instagram, Toney said his surgery went well and he'll be back like he never left, which maybe isn't the best choice of words considering this player's history. What was your reaction to this situation?
Frustration, for sure.
Yeah.
So in Toney's career, he's had 37 scheduled games between the Giants and the Chiefs. Take a stab at how many he's played in a row at most.
Oh, in a row? Oh,
yeah.
God, like 6?
7, and it's the last 7 games he played last year for the Chiefs. So
crazy.
Those games before that, he played 4 games in a row, got hurt 3 games, was out for 4 games, played 1, missed 2, played 2, missed 5, played 3, missed 3, and then the 7 that he just played. I mean, his injury history is extensive, and it's extensive with both the Giants and the Chiefs. And this is the exact.
I mean, this is his 3rd time getting hurt with the Chiefs.
Yes.
Yeah. He's been here for half a season.
And it's just, it's disheartening for sure. And you wonder if he's just one of those guys, a Sammy Watkins type that just can't stay on the field. It's not an effort issue. It's not even really like it doesn't appear to be a conditioning issue. Like those guys are ripped. I mean, they're, it's not like he doesn't look like he takes care of his body. It's just not every body is built for the grind of the NFL and the way that they move around and stuff. And it's not to say that Kadarius couldn't have a Sammy 2019 week 1 type of game left in him before he leaves the Chiefs, where he goes out and goes beast mode for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns or whatever. Like his ceiling is still remarkably high, but as a Chief, his best game was 4 catches for 57 yards and an 11-yard rush or 33-yard rush. That was his best game. And that was the Jaguars game in the middle of last year, the second game that he was as a Chief. And other than that, it's just been 1 catch, 2 catch, 1 catch, 1 catch, 2 catch. And it just, I don't know. I'm off the KT train, the hype train. I'm not off the support train, but
sure. I mean, we obviously,
I can't convince myself that he's a big part of this team anymore. Not until he shows it on the field.
Sure. Well, we obviously hope for the best with the injury situation, hope that he makes a full recovery, hope that he balls out. But yeah, it just is getting hard to trust him. Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of hard to trust, that's a little bit mean. Let's just go to the next item on the news agenda here, which I have no emotional reaction to. Sure. Not a player that I've ever rostered on any of my fantasy teams. Certainly not a player that I rostered on my dynasty team with high hopes for after he had that 100-yard, 2-touchdown game for Seattle like 3 years ago. John Ross, the player picked before Patrick Mahomes, the pick before by the Cincinnati Bengals in the 2017 NFL draft, NFL Combine 40-yard dash record holder John Ross has decided to retire from the NFL. This is a little bit surprising just because Nate Jacobs, who does great work for 41, had predicted him to make the roster like 2 days before he announced his retirement. It's crazy because, by all accounts, he looked like he was healthy. He was moving around good out there. We haven't heard anything since then that like he got hurt again or whatever it was. He just spent a couple of days out at St. Joe and he said, I'm out. I'm good.
Yeah. Someone else that might be considering retiring is you. You just made 2 mistakes. I'm just going to point them out and not even edit them out. You said John Ross played for Seattle. You didn't. And you said Nate Jacobs and it's Nick. So just, buddy, got to sharpen up. Well, I'm relying on you to be my...
Well, it's training camp for us too. So,
it's training camp for us too.
It was against Seattle. Excuse me. I promise you it was against Seattle.
Sure. I believe you there. But yeah, John was a guy that I don't think anybody really... Although we didn't expect him to make an impact on the Chiefs or even make the 53-man roster, I think he was a cut candidate based on just kind of where the Chiefs were at with a lot of these other wide receiver prospects. He was still a guy that I think retirement was not on anyone's thought process. Like you said, drafted in 2017.
I mean, he's 27 years old.
Yeah, he's the same age as Pat. And it might just be that he is done with the mental part of it. Like it might not be anything physically. We have no idea, but just kind of a left field retirement. I'm obviously very fortunate that he's not a guy that we were like, if this had been Justin Ross and he retired, sure, that would be a devastating blow. Unfortunately.
Yeah. We wouldn't have been able to do the podcast this week.
Yeah, no, out of mourning. No, but yeah, John, so long. Thanks for the memories.
It was week 1, 2019 against Seattle is what I was thinking of. He was playing for the Bengals.
Sure.
7 receptions, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. You kidding me?
Week 1 is the best time.
And that's the best time.
Was that the same? You said that was 2019? So he didn't even have the best receiving week 1 in 2019 because that was obviously Mr. Sure. Sammy Watkins. And we were all geeking out, since he was going, oh, we got John Ross back. And we're going, John Ross, you guys don't have Sammy Watkins. You're screwed.
Yeah, exactly right. It was a banner day for wide receivers in the NFL, week 1, 2019. So long ago in NFL years. So let's talk about camp news. And this is going to be mostly positive. So we kind of worked our way back to the sandwich here. Let's start with the wide receiver group. And this is obviously the group that we've been hyping all offseason as the most intriguing positional battle going into training camp. And I feel like, Kadarius getting hurt since he was a lock to make the roster. And John Ross's surprise retirement, even though he was not a lock to make the roster. And let's be clear, DeAndre Hopkins' surprising decision to forego a chance to win a ring with Patrick Mahomes to play with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. It's opened up some space, and I feel like it's made this roster battle a little bit more interesting. So it feels like the main focus so far through the first week of camp has been on the wide receivers. We'll start with second-round pick Rashee Rice, who by all accounts has been the star of camp since the first day, when he puked his way through practice and threw up dozens of times all over the field, and then came out and said, I'm glad I'm puking. It shows that I'm working really hard. He's balled out since then. So listen, if Rashee Rice goes out and has like a 1,000-yard rookie season, that will be a legend for all time. For his entire NFL career, the puking at the first practice and then being like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah. It just means I'm working hard. That would be legendary.
It would. It'd be a great little way to start his career off. Fun anecdote, something that he could then, in 8 years when he's the Chiefs' all-time career leader in receiving yards, he could be telling the rookies like, hey, man, hey, Rook, just keep at it. Back when I was your age, I puked and look where I am now. So,
That's right.
Yeah, it's fun to, see his progress so far, quick progress. Very much went from kid needs to run more to kids to stand out in camp within weeks. So, that's a good sign for him. And boy, talk about a position where the Chiefs need some positivity, and it seems like they have it.
Let's talk about Justin Ross, because obviously you're the conductor of that hype train, or one of the conductors for that hype train. He was receiving first team reps in the first practice of camp, and I've been checking X to see
Jesus.
CP's been getting first team reps since. Yeah,
You've
no,
been
it's
checking.
just, I've been checking. I've been scrolling the. I can't find a way to put X
There
in
is no way,
timeline, but
there,
no, it's fine.
you
It
can't.
just it
Time
doesn't make
licks,
sense.
time links.
There's,
It's just
there's just no way to translate so much of Twitter's vernacular to X. It just doesn't make any sense. Justin Ross was spotted taking reps as the gunner on special teams. He did get first team reps the first day of camp. I don't know what his reps have been like since then. I've been trying to check that out on the X, and maybe X just isn't delivering the content that we crave. But your thoughts on this? Because I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag, right? Especially after Kadarius Toney got hurt out there fielding punts. Like, being able to gun on special teams is a way for him to add value and certainly propel himself towards a roster spot. On the other hand, if he's out there playing special teams, it doesn't exactly scream, we think this guy's going to be our number one receiver.
No, but what it does tell me is that they're not worried about his health, or at least to the point where, you would baby him, you would handle him with kid gloves. If they thought like the moment Justin Ross steps on a field, his bones are going to shatter like glass, they would not have him out practicing on special teams. And really, they should have treated Kadarius Toney like that, but they didn't.
Sure, right.
But I do think that just the involvement that he's had so far, the rapport that he clearly has with Patrick Mahomes, his camp news has been all positive. It's been very much a guy that will be a disappointment if he doesn't make the final 53. But let's just real quick look at who all he would have to climb to make the 53. Sure. Because, I think wide receivers 6 and 7, like that's kind of, are they going to keep 6? Are they going to extend that with maybe when they don't have a fullback, maybe they add an extra spot to the wide receiver room? But like right now, MVS, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice, Justin Watson, those guys are locks, all 5 of them.
They're all going to make the roster, but it's always possible that Toney could be
IR'd. And if Toney's IR'd, that helps Justin Ross immensely because that locks him as a roster spot. But I mean, after those 5, you've got Richie James, who's had, we'll talk about him. He's had a good camp. But like, that puts Justin, if all 6 of those guys were above him on the depth chart, that would put him 7th, which is tough to crack the roster as the wide receiver 7. But if he's getting first team reps and if he's got a good relationship with Mahomes, now all of a sudden, maybe Justin Watson, they signed him to a free agent deal.
If he's adding value to Dave Toub, right. Dave Toub has control over like the last 13 spots on the roster.
He does. If he's a Dave Toub guy, he's locked in. So it's just really interesting how they're going to construct this roster with all these wide receivers that, they all feel like those 7 guys all feel like they deserve a roster spot. Can you imagine if they had signed Nook? Like, Justin Ross wouldn't make this team, I don't think.
No, he wouldn't. And I mean, guys like Justin Watson, who they re-signed, probably would be a threat to miss, to get cut, or to get traded late in camp for, a warm body or whatever. But speaking of wide receivers and speaking of the 3 guys, I mean, the 3 young lottery ticket wide receivers, Sky Moore, the Chiefs' 2nd round pick last year, says he's, quote, 30 times more comfortable with the offense this year, which, like,
it's a great quote.
I love it because, I mean, obviously every, second year player is going to be like, the game slowed down for me. I'm more familiar with the playbook, whatever. But like 30 times is a very specific number. Yes. Like, I feel like he gave that some thought. Like 100 times, okay,
is 50, a very round
50 times, 10 times, but 30 times is a very specific number. It feels like he gave that a little bit of deliberative thought. That's a high number, and it's a weird number.
It's almost like he has a playbook in his brain and knows that last year I ran 10 plays, and this year I can run 300 plays. Like, it's like he really has, come to that number with a little bit, like you said, a little bit of thought. I mean, obviously the pressure, and maybe it's not pressure that Sky Moore is feeling, but certainly the narrative pressure on him to come out this season and be a productive, not just a positive part of the offense, but like there are catches to go around. There's a lot of catches to go around. No more Juju. And, obviously with Kadarius's injury, I mean, there are no more McCole Hardman, who had an early part of the offense last year. He's gonna get his opportunities, and he better be 30% or 30 times or more familiar with the offense, because he's going to need every single bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's flip over to defense, or excuse me, let's continue elsewhere on the offense outside of the wide receiver room. Running back Denerick Prince has been showing out, especially in the passing game. That's nice to see. Isaiah Pacheco obviously showed up to camp. There was some question about whether he would begin camp on the physically unable to perform list, the PUP list. He is wearing the yellow "Don't Hit Me" jersey still, but he looks to be moving around well, and it doesn't seem like there's any danger of him missing the first part of the season. And on the offensive line, as expected, Donovan Smith is the left tackle. Jawan Taylor is the right tackle. Wanya Morris missed a couple of days with a hamstring injury. He is back at practice. It sounds like there was some speculation amongst the Chiefs beat reporters that were he healthy, he would be kind of the second team left tackle, which is something that you predicted after he was drafted, even though obviously he's played right tackle more recently and maybe has more of a prototypical right tackle build. But it sounds like that's where he would be getting reps if he were getting reps at all. Now, he is back at practice. I have not seen anybody say, again, this might be an X issue, because I
haven't seen it either.
I X'd Wanya Morris's name with left tackle and right tackle and LT and RT, and X didn't show me any X's. So
yeah, I think with the existence of Darian Kennard, that's another reason why I think the second team, it just makes some more sense to go ahead and slot Morrison over on the left. I mean, really interesting depth pieces that the Chiefs have on the offensive line. Clearly the top five,
I agree.
Are championship type of winning, starting five. But I just think that especially Wanya Morris, looks like that he might be the heir apparent to left tackle if they don't end up, maybe moving Jawan Taylor back over there after Donovan Smith leaves or something. I mean, they've got options. They have a couple tackles that can play both spots. They have both Wanya and Jawan that can play both spots. Sure. And they have a veteran left tackle. They've got a young right tackle that they drafted last year. I mean, they have tackle options, and then the interior is as solid as any interior in the NFL. So really, really good job that the Chiefs have done in general on the line construction.
On defense, probably the buzziest player so far is cornerback Najee Johnson, who of course was the 7th round pick along with Isaiah Pacheco and Jalen Watson last year. And he has been taking first team reps at quarterback and getting quite a bit of buzz. And Nate Taylor reported that Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson have been spotted cycling in with the second team. This is pretty wild to me, because agreed. Not that I doubt at all Najee Johnson's ability. He was a guy that we really, liked the physical profile, especially for a 7th round pick. I mean,
what a freaking 7th round by Beach.
I just is
what a monster.
It's unreal. I mean, the whole draft has been unreal.
Yeah.
And obviously, if Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson continue to be contributors on this team, and then Najee Johnson is also contributing on this team, that's literally that's every single pick, essentially, with the exception of that tackle they took in the 5th round. I mean, that's
Kennard,
yeah, sure, Kennard. That is every pick in the draft contributing.
That's going 9 for 10 up to bat with 9 homers. I mean, it's
three of those were 7th round picks, which you should not ever be hitting on a 7th round pick. Essentially, no. It's crazy to me. I'm really curious to see what the plan is to cornerback in week 1. We obviously can't predict that based on who's getting the reps at first and second team cornerback and the first day in pads, but it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. And it's great that regardless of whether Najee ends up starting or getting significant playing time, the fact that he's even in there taking first team reps shows that they have the confidence to go to him during the season if they have to. And having depth at cornerback is something that the Chiefs have certainly never had in the Mahomes era, not to any significant degree. And it's great to see.
Yeah, it's one thing that I would love to someday sit down and pick any NFL coach's brain about is when you're sending a guy out early on in training camp for the first team, are you just seeing, can he play with the big boys? Like, are
Right.
you testing
Sure.
him as like a, we've seen you work out, we've seen you play with the scout team, we've seen you play on special teams. But if we go out there and like Mahomes is a quarterback and we're running first team drills, like, are you going to be able to hang with the first team? And I just don't know if that's something that they care about. I don't know if like putting
Sure.
Najee out there early on and then cycling in Watson and Williams, maybe Watson and Williams, they know, all right, we got these guys.
Sure.
They're
Right. They
picking
know what they
off
can do.
balls in the AFC Championship, like they're fine. And let's see what some of the young guys have with the first team. I would love to kind of get inside the heads there and figure out, like, when you slot guys in, are you doing it with a like, this is my best guy, so I got to throw him in the first team, or is it more of a test? I just don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. That's going to do it for training camp news. Can't wait to cycle back next week and see where we're at. Will Chris Jones be there? Who knows? Who can say? Let's talk about
what is happening.
There is so much happening in the NFL. It's ridiculous. So we're going to have to really just hit the highlights here because there's just a ton going on. Let's start with Justin Herbert, who kind of out of nowhere. I mean, we knew he was going to get paid. Obviously, he was going to get a new deal, but it was like you didn't hear like, oh, Justin Herbert and the Chargers are close to a new deal. It just happened. It just happened a couple of days ago. I was on my way home from work and saw the contract, sent it over. 5 years, $262.5 million, 262 500 so $262.5 million. That's $52.5 million per year, so 52.5 APY. I read that there's like $100 million in new cash that's coming next season, which is crazy just in terms of the signing bonus and everything like that.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by the numbers at all?
Not really. No, I mean, I guess the surprise comes more from the fact that I knew he would get that. Like,
sure.
Like I knew he would be a $50 million north of that quarterback.
Right.
But yet, when you do a resume comparison, it just, I love Herbert as a quarterback. I mean, his arm, and I think he's a cool customer. And like, I really think that
every time he plays the Chiefs, he looks like the second best quarterback in the NFL.
He looks incredible. But then he just doesn't get it done when the Chiefs aren't the opponent. I mean, he's
sure.
and
a lot of times he doesn't get it done when the Chiefs are the opponent.
No, and he doesn't. He's won and whatever against Mahomes, and it's just I know that not all these guys can have 4 years into their career. They cannot have like as sparkling resumes as we're used to here. Like it's just not normal for a guy to have 4 straight home AFC Championship games after 4 years. But and I know he's at 5 now, but I just compared
through 4 seasons. That's fair. 4 seasons to start.
And I know that the Chargers are happy with Herbert. And I know that nobody there is sitting there going like, I hope we didn't make a mistake with this guy. Like, I just know it. He's a very easy guy to project having a long and successful NFL career. It's just the winning is something that, to me, given the rest of the talent on their team, which has been competitive, they have had stars on their team. Like, it's not like Herbert came into the 2011 Detroit Lions or something. Like, he had the pieces, and they keep blaming the coaching, that maybe it's all Joe Lombardi's fault, who is now in Denver. Maybe once they get Kellen Moore in, an offensive coordinator, everything's going to click. But until I see it, I don't know. I'm just kind of nonplussed by the whole Herbert Chargers experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously something that had to happen. It was going to happen. I am a little bit surprised at the amount of new cash up front, because the Spanos family is not known to be they're like the Brown family that owns the Bengals, who we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
They're known to be a little bit tight-fisted, and this obviously had to get done. Chargers finally have a franchise quarterback. He looks great. It just is crazy to me that James Palmer put out a tweet the other day of the all-time per game average passers. So like, how many passing yards they average per game? And Herbert's like 3rd or 4th all time. And he's right there with Drew Brees. And he's like 25 yards per game behind Patrick Mahomes. He was in first place by a mile. It just is, it's crazy. I mean, when you compare their first 49 games, because that's where Herbert's at now, Patrick Mahomes had like 25 more touchdowns. And Herbert's thrown like the most touchdowns in NFL history through 3 seasons, right? Like that's a fake stat because it
through
doesn't.
the seasons, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But I mean, if you then contextualize that stat, Patrick Mahomes destroys him. I mean, in every statistical category. It's crazy to me that like they can have the second best quarterback in the division and a top 5 quarterback in football, and they aren't us. They don't have our outlook on being able to go and win the Super Bowl. I mean, Herbert's been in one playoff game and he blew a 27-point lead. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's one thing that has really helped him though in that regard with the numbers there is his attempts. So even though his yards per game are high, the raw number of yards per game, through 49 games in NFL history, he's thrown more passes than any quarterback in NFL history. So
that's like a Derek Carr stat right there.
It is a Derek Carr stat. And excuse me, I forgot Matt Stafford, who threw about 50 more passes than Justin Herbert in second place. But, when you compare, like, let's say the difference between Mahomes and Herbert, which we're obviously very interested in, pass attempts for Justin Herbert through 49 games, 1,966 for Patrick Mahomes, 1,798. So a good 150, 170 plus for Justin Herbert there. And despite that, yards, Mahomes is up on him by 100 yards or by 1,000 yards, 14,089 to 15,092. Boy, Mahomes, that is crazy to have 160 less pass attempts and 1,000 more yards and
then Justin Herbert.
Touchdowns like 30 more than him, 94 to 123. So like,
and Herbert is off to one of the best starts in NFL history.
And is good. He's a good quarterback. It's
he's absolutely fucking dwarfed by Patrick Mahomes.
Right. Exactly.
The other corollary to this, and we'll talk about Joe Burrow again in a second. Joe Burrow, according to Adam Schefter, is expected to come in well north of Herbert's 52.5 APY. So I'm not sure exactly what well north of that means, but I would be shocked based on that reporting, assuming that that's accurate from Schefter, which, who knows. I would be shocked at this point if Burrow came in below 55. Yeah. I mean, like,
you almost
talked about this the other day.
North if it's below 55,
sure,
right?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like 55 is the floor for it to be well north of what Herbert is asking. And I mean, it could be more than that. I mean, who knows? Like the guy, I think Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow are probably pretty comparable as players, but like
skill set wise or resume wise.
Well, I mean, talent wise, and not even necessarily like physical tools. I just think they're probably pretty comparable as players. Yeah. That being said, Joe Burrow's resume is much better, and that matters in negotiations. I mean, when you can
Joe Burrow wins games.
Right, exactly. And when you can go to the owner and say, I got us to a Super Bowl, we're the fucking Cincinnati Bengals. Does it matter that he did nothing in the fourth quarter in any of those playoff games? Does it matter that he's literally never scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter? Does it matter that he had like 5 chances to win the game against the Chiefs in regulation and couldn't do it before we shitted away that game in overtime? No, it doesn't matter because he got to the Super Bowl and he could ask for $55 million a year because he got to the Super Bowl. He didn't win, but he got there. And Justin Herbert's made it to the playoffs once, and he blew a 27-point lead to the Jags.
And after his 2-7-1 and got hurt rookie year, he went 10-6 and 12-4. And I mean, Burrow has shown that when he is leading that football team, they're a beast. They're a different animal than when he's not. And to be quite frank, Justin Herbert hasn't shown that. Justin Herbert has not taken the Chargers to the next level. He doesn't have that dog in him. He doesn't. He went 6-9, 9-8, and 10-7 in his 3 years and lost his one playoff game and blew a 27-point lead. There's just it's hard to look at that and say, I want you to be the highest paid player in NFL history for now.
I mean,
but that's what he got. And I mean, more power to him and more power to the Chargers and all that stuff. But I just think it was timed poorly on everyone's account there because Herbert just doesn't do it yet. And maybe he will, but I think 55 is a pretty good kind of floor estimate, I think.
Yeah. Let's keep it in the division and let's talk about what happened with Sean Payton today because I just don't know. I don't get it. So Sean Payton gave an interview with USA Today. I'm just going to read you a few choice quotes here. Can I say this to you? I'm going to be pissed off if this is not a playoff team. Okay. All right. Interesting.
Well, you're going to get ready.
Yeah, right. He's going to be pissed off. It doesn't happen often where an NFL team or organization gets embarrassed. That's what happened here. Part of it was their own fault relative to spending so much expletive time trying to win the offseason. The PR, the pomp and circumstance, marching people around and all this stuff. We're not doing any of that. The Jets did that last year. You watch Hard Knocks, all of it. I could see it coming. Remember when Dan Snyder put the dream team together? I was the Giants. I was a young coach. I thought, how are we going to compete with them? Deion Sanders there now. That team won 8 games or whatever. So listen, just put the work in. Now, this is a hugely ironic statement coming from Sean Payton because the guy has literally not been off of my TV since the Super Bowl.
Yes.
And he's literally sitting down giving an interview that he knows is going to be the talk of the league today. He knows that people are going to be talking about this. He knows he's going to be the number one story in the NFL the day that this article drops. Because
I don't know. It was a little magazine called
stuff.
USA Today. I mean, it's not like it was
it's not anything big, whatever. It's just wild stuff for an NFL head coach to say, even if it's true. I mean, listen, he went on to say that the coaching staff last year was one of the worst coaching staffs in NFL history, that it literally was one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL, which, like, okay, maybe, like, I get it, but are you allowed to say that? Should you say that? The lack of self-awareness here is staggering to me, because he's talking about how last year they fucked up because they wanted to win the offseason and they wanted to be hyped and blah, blah, blah. And he's saying, I'm going to be pissed if we're not a playoff team. I fixed Russell Wilson. Look at me. I went on all these different interviews. Mm-hmm. I did media row. When I knew I was going to be the coach of the Broncos, I was on the beach in Cancun the week before the draft. There's a video of me ripping a bong with 16-year-olds. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he's been way more out there trying to win the offseason than Nathaniel Hackett was.
He has. I didn't even see Nathaniel Hackett before the Broncos started last year. Let me read you an X by Ryan Clark, okay?
Okay.
This is a good X. He says, Sean Payton is a Super Bowl champion and a living offensive legend in our league, and I have nothing but respect for what he's accomplished throughout his career, which makes it hard for me to understand why he feels the need to punch down on former Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett. The entire world saw what a clusterfuck the Broncos were last year, so no need to point it out nor throw shade at your current quarterback while minding the Jets business. We should be able to expect more from secure leaders of men when we hear from them. I expect to learn a lot about what we, the Broncos, could do to be better. Instead, he told us what he thought about them. Week 5 versus the Jets should be fun. It's
100%.
Sean Payton doesn't need to tell people that the team last year was a mess. We all know they were a mess. We watched football. We saw that they were a mess. And anyone else in that position, any of the 31 current coaches and pretty much every former coach I can think of, would have not touched the previous year's record or, their competency with a 30-foot pole. That is just, it's not something in the business that people do. You don't torch the guy that was in the seat before you were in it. It's just not kosher.
And some of those people are still there. Like, I mean, some of the general manager is still there.
He said the president and GM, he put them under the bus.
Yeah, exactly. The president and the GM, who, by the way, the president, the current owner, hired, and the GM is still the GM. Yeah. So, like, these are people that he will see, that he saw in the office today.
He must be an arrogant prick. Like, he must just think that it doesn't really matter what any of these guys around. I'm the savior. I'm walking into Broncos headquarters being the guy that everyone needs. And if they don't like it, they can get out. Like, that just feels like the vibe that he's giving off here.
And if he's right and the Broncos are a playoff team, good for him. It'll work out. But if he's not, I actually kind of don't think he's going to get another coaching job. I think if this blows up, I think he's going to TV and he's staying there, because I think people are going to say, like, look, you just
couldn't do it.
Shit all over our entire organization, and then you failed. So, let's talk about the Raiders. This was a little bit tricky. I wanted to just kind of throw them in here because we had an AFC West thing kind of going. Jimmy Garoppolo is their quarterback, whatever. He's not going to start on the PUP list. So this is our Raiders item. They signed Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters, former chief, back in the AFC West as a Las Vegas Raider. And I actually haven't looked at their depth chart recently, but I have to assume that like 32-year-old Marcus Peters, or however old he is now,
He was all right last year.
is going to be. I mean, he's definitely going to start for them. I mean, he's 29, by the way. He's
sure.
He just turned 30. So I mean,
he's older in headline years than he is in actual years. Yeah,
that's
yeah. He went from the Rams to the Ravens to the Raiders, so maybe he's just doing his R tour of the NFL there before he retires. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, good luck to him. Patrick Mahomes knows how to give him the ball. You think Patrick Mahomes hasn't forgotten that quote? Like, this is. You don't think when Marcus Peters lines up in a Raider uniform that these guys aren't going to get after him? Like, that's going to be fun.
Honestly, like I hadn't forgotten about the quote, but I hadn't even really considered the implications of Patrick Mahomes facing him again, and making him eat shit all over the field for what he said in 2018.
Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah, well, goats never forget.
They certainly don't. One final news item. We mentioned Joe Burrow was going to be back on here. We had to add this to the agenda. Joe Burrow was carted off at Bengals practice today with a calf issue. Diana Rossini has since reported that it is a calf strain. She says the Bengals coaches have been told that it's a calf strain for Burrow. It sounds like they still need to do some further tests. It sounds like they probably are pretty confident that it's not something significantly worse than that. We still don't know exactly what it is, and we still don't know what the exact prognosis is. For a calf strain, best case scenario, he's probably looking at suiting up week 1, but probably not getting a lot of reps through the rest of camp. And certainly, I would assume they're not going to put him in any preseason action at this point. And listen, the man's in the middle of a contract negotiation where he's asking for well north of $52.5 million a year. You think this little scare is going to maybe, it certainly isn't going to make him ask for less money. That's all I'm saying.
No, and he already has had one NFL injury in his career early on, which I know they're different situations, but it's just kind of one of those deals where when they get to the negotiating table, they go, how do we know you're going to be healthy? You weren't healthy 2 years ago. You weren't healthy. You're not healthy right now. Like, it's a bullet in the Bengals chamber now that they didn't have before this injury. I think it's going to end up helping them. I think him getting hurt right around contract negotiations and getting less money is not going to hurt Joe Burrow. Doesn't really matter if he gets 55 or 52 or 56, whatever $1 million a year, he'll be fine. But it does, unfortunately, help the Bengals massage that number down a little bit and fit it in their cash strapped, cap and system and all that stuff. So I think this could end up. Now, the other thing, though, is if it does rock the boat enough, and if he doesn't get the reps in offseason that he needs, and if he starts out week 1 a little rusty, and let's say the Bengals drop a game or 2 in their first 4 that they probably should have won, and it cost them a playoff positioning, and it could have butterfly effects down the road that end up hurting the Bengals. But right now, the way I see it, it's probably just going to shave a little bit of money off this deal, and probably the Bengals are okay with that.
Yeah, they probably are. And that's what's happening in the NFL. We'll update as we know more. Let's go to our final segment, the Ass Blast from the Past, Week 12, 2003, baby. The Chiefs are 10-1. They rebounded from their first loss of the season 2 weeks ago against the hated Cincinnati Bengals to beat the hated. Every time that we do this, my brain is like, don't say it. Think about where they play. Don't say Las Vegas. Don't say Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The Oakland Raiders in 2003. Yeah. The 2003 Oakland Raiders, the Chiefs defeated last week in a little bit of a thriller, And this week they go to San Diego to take on the Chargers. Now, the Chiefs are going to win this game. Spoiler alert. Final score is 28-24. But we have to start by talking about the Chargers. They're 2-9. Second-year quarterback Drew Brees has been benched after starting 1-7 for the Chargers. He would actually go on to go 11-4 in 2004, and he won the Comeback Player of the Year in 2004, which is wild because he was a third-year player who was bad in year 2. Like,
right.
How does that make sense? How does that make any sense at all? Like, so you had a young quarterback who was kind of good, relatively speaking, as a rookie. Then he was really bad as a second-year player, and then he was kind of good in year 3. And it's like, all right, good sweet comeback, bro. Like, you're still an ascending player. You're in your third year. Like, well, it doesn't make any sense at all. In any case. For this game, the Chargers are quarterbacked by fellow short king, Doug Flutie. And
Yes.
we have to talk about Doug Flutie because I went down a Doug Flutie rabbit hole today, and
Easy to do.
I'm sure there's a lot of Flutie heads out there. But listen, the early 2000s Chargers must have been really quite progressive when it comes to quarterback stature, because they were rostering a 6-foot starting quarterback, Drew Brees, backed up by a 5'10" quarterback, which has to be like the shortest quarterback room in NFL history.
Easily.
I don't know that there's any way to verify.
They could have
that,
had third stringer Brock Osweiler, and they still would have been the shortest quarterback.
Sure, yeah. I mean, 6 foot and 5'10". That's crazy. So Doug Flutie has to be like the most interesting thing about this game, even though it ended up being kind of an interesting game. But Doug Flutie is he's a fascinating player. We have to talk about Doug Flutie. Can we talk about Doug Flutie?
So let's talk about Doug Flutie.
Let's quickly recap his career. He wins the 1984 Heisman Trophy. He's quarterbacking the Boston College Eagles to a 10-2 record,
Birds.
and go Birds. Number 5 national ranking in the AP poll. He famously defeats future Browns legend Bernie Kosar and the defending college football champion Miami Hurricanes, coached by future NFL Hall of Famer Jimmy Johnson, on a 48-yard Hail Mary to Hail Flutie with 6 seconds left, shortly after Thanksgiving, 1984, in which he throws the ball from his own 37 in the end zone. This is a 5'2" guy against 30-mile-an-hour winds. So it's a 48-yard touchdown by yardage, but it ends up being like a 60-plus touchdown pass in the air. And
how is that physically possible?
I don't know, against 30-mile-an-hour winds. And of course, Miami they didn't even have guys in the end zone. So they're like, there's absolutely no way that this guy could possibly throw this ball to the end zone. And he does. He wins the game essentially on a walk-off. This made Doug Flutie the first major college quarterback in history to throw for more than 10,000 yards in his college career. The NFL, of course, has concerns over Doug Flutie's size, him being 5'10". This is 1984. Things were real crude. So he chooses to go play for the nascent USFL. The New Jersey Generals owner, a famously successful businessman, Donald Trump, makes Doug Flutie the highest paid professional football player on earth with a 5-year, $7 million contract. He's the highest paid rookie football player ever and the highest paid player in any professional football league, which there were two, the NFL and the USFL. Unlike other successful Trump business ventures like Trump Steaks, Trump Shuttle, aka Trump Airlines, and Trump University, the USFL was not a success. And really out of character for Trump business ventures. And Doug Flutie found himself in the NFL after the USFL folded in 1986. So he starts a playoff game for the 1986 Bears, a fact which is omitted from Doug Flutie's Wikipedia article, even though it was one of 2 playoff games that he started in his career, probably because he went 11-31 in this game for 134 yards and 2 picks in a game that the Bears lost 27-13. It's awful. It's
and
also
the 86 Bears, like they were a monster in 85.
Defending Super Bowl champions. So Doug Flutie goes 6-3 for a spell in New England as a Patriot. And then he's benched in favor of Tony Eason, who hasn't played in a year and promptly loses his only start of the year to eliminate the Patriots from playoff contention.
Oof.
So sad. So Doug Flutie bolts the NFL for the CFL. And in 1991, he becomes the CFL's single season passing leader all time with 6,619 yards.
Woof.
Which is a record, by the way, that stands in the Canadian Football League to this day. In fact, Doug Flutie holds 4 of the top 10 highest passing yardage totals in CFL history. And he absolutely dwarfs every other CFL player in career passing yards per game. He had 306.3 passing yards per game in the CFL. Second place has 269 per game. So he's he's lapping the field. He has like 12% more yards per game. Right. I mean, it's absurd.
They have 120-yard fields in the CFL. It's very weird.
It's very weird for a lot of reasons. It's weird that they play football in Canada. But anyway, Doug Flutie, 4-time Grey Cup MVP. He was an absolute superstar in the CFL. And so he gets bored of dominating Canada. And at the ripe old age of 36 in 1998, he returns to the NFL to quarterback the Buffalo Bills. He actually goes 21-9 in 3 seasons as the starter for the Bills, but he loses to the ghost of Dan Marino in his only playoff appearance, literally 1 year before Marino retired. And he was a shell of his former self. Still was able to beat the Bills. Classic playoff failures and flameouts, the Buffalo Bills. So finally, at age 39, Doug Flutie decides to get some sun, retire in sunny San Diego, California, get away from that, Canadian / northern New York weather, and retire to San Diego, California, where he gets a part-time job quarterbacking the Chargers. So that's how at age 41, Doug Flutie is facing the 10-1 Kansas City Chiefs in 2003 as a 41-year-old 5'10" man playing NFL quarterback.
You know who I blame for that whole narrative? I
Donald
blame
Trump?
Vince McMahon, actually,
okay.
because
Okay. All right,
this story of Doug Flutie dominating in one league for decades and being a Hall of Famer. I say decades, but obviously long time in the CFL. And then in the 90s, just getting on a whim to go play for the competition and go, be there. That's like exact WWF, WCW formula where like Hulk Hogan goes from the WWF to the WCW. Like that's just, I just get that vibe of like, that's Doug Flutie's music and like, oh my God, we didn't expect him and blah, blah, blah. So it's just
my God.
It was a different
Canadian accent.
Yeah, it was. It was a different time. It just the 90s were crazy, and you could just go from the CFL winning the Grey Cup to go start in the NFL. You can't do that anymore.
No,
never happened.
You certainly can't. But the 90s were a different time, and 2003, frankly, was a different time. That was 20 years ago.
Basically the 90s.
It was basically still the 90s. So let's take stock of where the Chiefs were at coming into this game. At 10-1. Coming off of, revenging their first loss and facing a division opponent.
So the Chiefs come into this game with the best record in the NFL at 10-1, but right on their heels, as we've established for the last couple of weeks, are three AFC teams: the Tennessee Titans, the Indianapolis Colts, the New England Patriots, all 9-2, all keeping the pressure on the 2003 Chiefs to just keep winning, because if you don't, we're going to steal that number one seed from you. The rankings, team rankings, just for a couple, I just went through and kind of saw where they were going into this game. Passing yards on offense, the Chiefs were 6th. Quarterback rating, they were 5th. Sacks allowed, they had the 5th fewest sacks allowed. Adjusted net yards per attempt, good Pro Football Reference stat there for how aggressive yet efficient you are on offense. 4th, number of first downs, 5th. Opponent rushing yards, though, 7th most. So they're giving up a lot of rushing yards on the defense, but sacks recorded by the defense, 4th highest. Interceptions by the defense, 2nd most. Opponent quarterback rating, 4th lowest. Look at this defense.
It's crazy.
They're getting shit done. Points for, they are obviously first, but with 333 points, 2nd most was 309 points. So they are a good, 24 points higher than the 2nd highest scoring team in the NFL. Points against, they were 9th best, which is also a top 10 defense in points is going to work every time with a number one offense. I mean, that's a great, I
was promised a league worse defense.
Yes, correct.
Where are these guys?
You were. They're 198 points allowed. First was 168. So they're only 30 off the pace of the number one scoring defense in the NFL through 11 games, which is pretty remarkable. Point differential, plus 135, first in the NFL. 2nd was plus 95. So they are plus 40 points better than the 2nd best team by differential. They are a hell of a football team. Takeaways, 2nd. Giveaways, 1st. So that differential, obviously, if you're going to be 2nd in takeaways and 1st in giveaways, they were plus 18 in turnover differential through this point of the season. 2nd best in the NFL, plus 12. So, I mean, they're 6 clear of the next best giveaway takeaway, which is just a hallmark of this team. They absolutely took care of the ball and took the ball away. Rushing touchdowns, they had 18, which was 1st in the NFL. 2nd most was 15. Return touchdowns, obviously we know that they were doing great there. 7, 1st in the NFL. 2nd was 5. And that's across the board. They had 2 punt returns, 2 kick returns, and 3 interception returns for touchdowns. So they were doing everything right on the return side. Offensive yards per play, 2nd. Defensive yards per play, 12th most, which is bad. But in general, this team is checking in pretty much everywhere you would want a Super Bowl contending team to check in 12 weeks, 11 games into the year. They are taking the ball away. They're taking care of it. They're efficient. They're explosive. They are just doing everything you need on both sides of the ball. Just a really, really ridiculous run for these 2003 Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, I was promised a league worst defense. This was the worst defense in the NFL in 2002, and we've gone through game by game, and certainly there have been some bad performances in there,
Sure.
but
There have
I
also been
mean,
some pretty damn good ones.
there have been some good ones. And on the balance, I mean, like you said, you simply cannot complain about this team. I wonder what's going to happen the last 5 weeks of the season, because surely there's no way they could go from being like essentially statistically a top 10 defense to being one of the worst defenses in the league. That can't happen over 5 weeks of a season. So
Stay tuned.
this was the third time in franchise history winning 12 out of 13 games. How many times have we done that since then, by the way? We did it in 1968. We did it in 1994. And this was the third time in franchise history that we won 12 out of 13. And I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, the year that we went on the run and won the playoff game against the Texans, which would have been 2015. Does that sound right? Surely we did it that year. But
I will tell you, the answer is they did it in 2016 that year.
Okay. Yep.
So actually, it started in 2015, the year you're talking about.
Yeah.
The 12 games actually ended in 2016.
Gotcha.
They then did it in 2017 through 2018. They did it in 2019 through 2020. They did it in 2020 through 2021, and they did it in 2021 through 2022. And by through, I mean that the spans have started in one year and ended in the other year. But basically every year, and not basically, actually every year of Patrick Mahomes' run in Kansas City, he has had a stretch where he's won 11 out of 12 games. But up until then, in 2003, when they did it, it was only the third time in franchise history.
It's crazy.
And they wouldn't do it again until 15. So in 15, it was the fourth time. That was pre-Mahomes. But then, so it's 4 before Mahomes. And really these stretches too are like huge stretches of you go 11-1, and then you shift a couple games 11-1 for Mahomes. So like he has the top looks like 16 stretches of 11-1 games. So like just a different time, man. Just a different time that we're living in now. But yes, at this time in 2003, going 11-1 was a big deal.
Sure, it was. It was a big deal then, and it should be a bigger deal now, except that we do it all the time. So it isn't a big deal to us anymore because we're doing it every year. That's just kind of how shit goes for us. This game, the Chiefs jump out to a 14-0 lead behind 2 Priest Holmes touchdown runs of 7 and 2 yards with 3 minutes into the second quarter, the Chiefs are up 2 touchdowns. LaDainian Tomlinson, who we talked about in the first meeting with the Chiefs, he comes back and scores a touchdown and cuts the lead to 7. And then with 2 minutes left in the half, Tony Gonzalez catches a 7-yard touchdown pass from Trent Green. Chiefs are up 14 at the half. Feeling pretty good about this one.
Yeah, feeling great, especially just given that, old ass Doug Flutie's starting and the Chargers are terrible. And I mean, this is it's an easy one. It's an easy game.
Yeah, and it turns out to be fairly easy. There's really not a whole lot else to say about the second half. The Chargers get a field goal, cut the Chiefs lead to 11, and then they get a touchdown and cut the lead to 4. But the Chiefs answer, and with 6 minutes left in this game, the Chiefs have an 11-point lead, a 2-score lead. I mean, at that point, in 2003 against Doug Flutie, like your win expectancy with an 11-point lead with 6.5 minutes left, it's got to be like 98%.
Sure, especially with this Chiefettes, baby.
That's right. The Chiefs do manage to close this one out. The Chargers get literally with 0 seconds left on the clock, touchdown pass from Doug Flutie to Antonio Gates to pad those numbers.
Yeah.
And make it look closer than it actually is, 28-24. You feel like that's a close game. It was not. The Chiefs essentially won this game by 2 scores. They just gave up that score at the very end. It's going to hurt the Chiefs' stats a little bit, but overall, a strong performance by the Chiefs in this game.
On the road against a team that, a division opponent that knows you well, that you already played once earlier this year.
Former coach yours, Marty Schottenheimer's coaching this team. So,
and a grizzled vet organization at quarterback. And,
extremely grizzled.
As grizzled as it gets. And it was a solid game. We are going to talk about some of the individual performances in our awards, but just the whole vibes here. I did think it was kind of funny looking at the numbers for total yards. Chiefs 335, San Diego 370. So they total yards, them turnovers. Chiefs 2 on 2 Trent Green picks. San Diego 3. So they kind of both gave the ball back and forth to each other. Penalties 6 for us, 5 for them. Third down conversions. Chiefs 5 of 12. San Diego 5 of 13. Fourth downs, both teams 1 for 1. Like it was pretty statistically even, other than just that the Chargers couldn't punch it in, and there were 2 special teams plays that the Chargers screwed up in typical Charger fashion.
Can't wait to talk about that.
Talk about those. So, but that it was a very pretty cookie cutter game in general.
Sure, pretty workmanlike performance. So let's turn to the awards here. We've got 3 awards. They're Always Sunny in Philadelphia themed. We've got our 5-star man. That's the player who, through his play, shouts, screams out, "I'm a 5-star man." We've got the trash man.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
Who, by his play, is eating garbage all over the field, just shoveling trash into his mouth through his play. And then we got the wild card.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who is someone who is capable of anything, good or bad. And so, do you want to kick it off, or do you want me to kick it off?
I would love to kick it off. And for the 5-star man, I am going to nominate the player that after this game is number 1 in fantasy points in 2003 by 30 points over second place Amon Green. And of course, that is Priest Holmes. Priest Holmes was a monster in this game. He was a monster in 2003. He was a monster as a Chief. But this game, 31 rushes, which was a lot for him, for 162 yards, 2 scores on the ground. Those early, punch in the gut, go up 14 scores that really set the tone. And just for good measure, as he always did, 4 catches for 24 yards for a total of 186 yards from scrimmage. Dude just fills the box score. Every time he goes out there, the Chiefs put the entire offense on his back, and he delivers time and time again. I think this year, for me, going back and looking at it, I knew that Priest was a superhero because when I was 16, he was absolutely a superhero. But just going back and now having the perspective of 20 plus years of deep dive box score NFL watching, not just watching my favorite team, but really knowing how all these guys perform year in and year out, it's underscored it. It's made it more obvious that Priest Holmes was a man among boys every single time he went out there. He was the dude. It was not just the line, because believe me, I've had the discussions. I do think Jamal Charles was dynamic, and there's an argument to be made that he was a better running back than Priest Holmes. But for the time and for the situation and for what the team asked Priest Holmes to do, there was no one better. There was no one better suited for it. He was a monster. He is my 5-star man.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Priest as the 5-star man and sort of mentioned Trent as well, because yeah, Trent's going to be my trash man for this game. Listen, when you put the offense on Priest Holmes' back, all you got to do as the quarterback is not lose the game. Trent, unfortunately, did try to do that in this game. 17 of 30 for 155 yards. Not good, but the 2 picks in this game were killer, really kept the Chargers. That's part of the reason why the score ended up looking as close as it did, was those 2 turnovers from Trent. Listen, there are some contenders here. We could have thrown out perennial whipping boy Johnny Morton, who only caught. Well,
60 yards.
Yeah, but 3 of 8. Come on, he dropped 5.
Pretty classic Johnny Morton there.
Yeah, he couldn't haul in 5 balls. Eddie Kinnison in this game, 2 of 6 for 18 yards. Not good.
That's bad.
Larry Johnson only 1 carry in this game for 6 yards. Dante Hall had 2 targets, 1 reception for 2 yards. Listen. And
no punt return touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Outside of Priest, the whole offense was pretty crummy in this game. But Trent Green gets, he's the quarterback. It all flows through him. He gets the trash man.
He does. And I would love to tell you about my wild card selection for this game.
Oh, I can't.
So the Chiefs end up blocking 2 Chargers kicks in this game, which is very notable, but it's not as notable as I thought it would be. So first I want to talk about the Chiefs and blocking kicks, because I kind of had an intuition, I would say, that the number of times that the Chiefs have blocked a kick in franchise history, I kind of figured, you've been around since 1960 as the Dallas Texans. They probably block one every 2 years, which would mean that you're sitting at something like 30 block kicks after 60 years. But no, it's more than double that. They have blocked 71 kicks in franchise history, which I don't have context yet for if that's a lot or little or about right. I just looked up the Chiefs. But what is funny is that they blocked 2 in this game, and I thought, well, surely, even though they've blocked 71 kicks in franchise history,
how many?
What are the chances that they've done 2 in one game? But they've done that 8 times. Eight times they've come up with more than one field goal block in a game, which is remarkable. But 5 of those times did come from 1973 or earlier, which, football was crazy, and I don't even know if they were. It was real crude, but I mean, they did it twice in '93 to the Chargers, twice in 2003 to the Chargers.
Hold on. They did it twice in one game.
Yes,
to the Chargers.
Yes, to John Carney in 1993.
Three times.
They did it. Well, they blocked 2 kicks. Or they blocked 2 kicks in 93. They blocked 2 kicks in 2003, and they blocked 2 kicks in 1973. But in 1967, Dick Van Raphorst was the Chargers kicker, and he comes away with a 1 for 4 kicking field goals because 3 of them were blocked for the 1967 Chiefs. So that is the only time that they indeed blocked 3 kicks. However, we're going back to 2003. The Chiefs come away with 2 blocks, and I thought for the longest time as a Chiefs lifer, diehard, watched every snap of every game I've ever watched, I thought that John Browning and Eric Downing were the same dude. They both played defensive tackle. They've got the Owning in the last name. John Browning and Eric Downing. Like, you're really telling me that those are different guys? They are different guys.
It sounds like an alias, like 2 aliases for the same person.
Yes,
but he's too lazy to change his position. He's like undercover. He's like, I only know how to play defensive tackle and special teams, so I'm just gonna
maybe it's like a tax fraud position. Like he gets 2 paychecks from the Chiefs,
mustache, and
he doesn't do his taxes for John Browning, but he does for Eric Downing. I don't know. So John Eric Brown Downing is going to be my wild card for blocking 2 kicks in this game, and for actually being potentially 1 or 2 dudes. I have no idea.
I love it. Let's close this out with a mailbag question that we just received during the podcast from the Artist Chief, Corey04. Question for the pod: is 20-0 inevitable?
Yeah.
Yes. Also, I drive a UAP. Should you be concerned about my alien brethren and I? Yes.
Always.
We'll see you next week.